Like scary movies. What's your favorite scary movie?
Here's Johnny.
We'll tear your soul apart.
The boogeyman is real, and you found him.
Game over, man. Game over.
What do you want?
I want to hear you scream. From the third time, bitch.
Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, y'all know I am the SaWGuy, and you're joining me for episode 34 on the cult classic Halloween. I laugh because I know I said in previous episodes, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to follow the trend. Fuck that noise. Well, you know what? I am hyped up with this new Halloween movie coming out. And yeah, I'm going to be jumping on that hype train right there for y'all. So I wanted to take time and celebrate not only just the Halloween season going on right now, but I also wanted to, refresh everyone's memory about the original Halloween, the cult classic, the one that really put horror movies, or I should say the slasher genre, they put it right on the map, right? Now, us as horror fans, we all know the whole backstory. We all know that it was, a low-budget film that turned into this whole icon thing and everything. But to the normal average viewer, they probably don't know the behind-the-scenes stuff that made this, film so special. Even to this day, I'll throw out a little tidbit like, hey, did you know the mask was based off of William Shatner's face from Captain Kirk in Star Trek? Everyone's looking at me like I'm crazy, like, what? Yeah, but that's actually true. It really was. But it's, for me, I've always loved Halloween because it was not only, it's just, God, I don't know how to explain it, but I know it's just a great fucking horror film, and it's a classic. You have just enough scare, but you don't have, too much gore. You have enough suspense, and it doesn't give too much of the story away where it's like, oh, that's why he's crazy, or, oh, this is that. It was very mysterious. And that, to me, I think that's what makes it really good. But anyways, in every episode, as I do, I always break it down for you, and I'm going to throw in little tidbits about the film. Some of you guys might already know, some of you may not know, but if you guys are huge fans of Halloween, let me know in the comments below. I'm always anxious to hear what you guys think and what you guys know, because I like learning about this stuff. I mean, horror's my life, right? And me being the SaWGuy, I wanted to give you guys all a little bit of a treat, Halloween's right around the corner, so. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, with Halloween, what is it? When did it come out? Give me all the details, Mr. SaWGuy, right? So Halloween is actually written and directed by John Carpenter, but John Carpenter also had help with Deborah Hill, who co-wrote this film, right? Now, John Carpenter in 1978, he wasn't too big of a name. You got to remember, it's the reason why this film blew up, I think, in my opinion, is because of the fact of it was the right movie to come out at the right time. It really was, because in the late 70s, you didn't have too many, horror films that were like slashers and shit like that. I mean, you had, Texas Chainsaw. Before that, you had The Town That Dreaded Sundown. And they were good, but they were just so scary that people stayed away from them because of, everything that was going on in the 70s. I mean, you had the Zodiac Killer and shit going on, and all that whole business, right? But anyways, John Carpenter, he did action films at first. He did Assault on Precinct 13, and that starred Charles Cyphers, who was the sheriff in Halloween. And later on, he did one of my favorites, actually. He did this film called The Eyes of Laura Mars, right? He didn't, direct it or anything, but he wrote the screenplay. And it, showed his chops that he can do it really good. If you've never seen that film, look it up. It is a true classic. For me, it's a one and done film where it's American horror, but they did it with the Italian horror setup, and where it's slow, methodical. I never forgot it as a kid because my parents would always watch that shit. That was their first date movie that they went out on, or one of the first few horror movies they went on a date with, back in the 70s. So that's how I know it. But anyways, back to Halloween. I know for a fact with Halloween, it was obviously written and directed by John Carpenter, but they did, various different ideas with this, And to break down this whole film, it's basically a movie about a guy who loses it one day, and, that day happened to be on Halloween, not originally, but he was a little kid named Michael Myers. They never explained why he snapped, And the beginning of the movie shows that it's like Halloween in the 60s, right? You see his sister and her boyfriend, they start talking and everything. Then they go and they sit on the couch, and then they start making out, and, all that shit. They run upstairs, and then that's when it shows he's running around the house, gets his mask, gets the knife. The dude walks out. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. And then he goes up, and his sister's all distraught because she's butt naked, and then she's like, Michael! And then he stabs her. Then it shows that he runs out, and his parents are coming home. They're all like, Michael? And, that's how you start the film. One of my favorites of, the intro, I guess you could say, of starting a horror film, because it's so mysterious. It didn't explain anything. And then, flash forward into, 1978, I think the movie takes place on the 30th or the 29th. It's one of those 2 days. It shows that you have this doctor, the psychiatrist, and his nurse. They're driving back to the sanitarium. Then all of a sudden they start seeing all these inmates outside, and it's raining, it's cold, and it's dark. And they're like, what the fuck? They don't let the inmates out. So he runs out, tells the nurse stays in the car. This dude jumps up, breaks the window, scares her, takes off in the car, right? You find out that it's actually Michael Myers, the kid who killed his sister earlier, right? Then the story flashes into these 3 girls. Well, I shouldn't say 3 girls. It starts off with one, Laurie Strode, who is played by Jamie Lee Curtis. She was 19 years old when she did this film. This was her first actual film, because I think she only did TV commercials and stuff at the time, And John Carpenter, he's a huge fan of horror films, because this whole film of Halloween is all winks to it, One of his favorite films was Psycho, and he loved Janet Leigh so much that he cast her daughter, Jamie Lee Curtis, as his lead in his first, main horror film, which I thought was pretty cool, So anyways, it follows Laurie Strode. She comes out of the house. You find out that her dad's a realtor, gives her a key and says, hey, drop off the key at that old Myers house. Don't forget, she's walking by. She sees this kid, I was going to say Tommy Doyle. And he's the kid that she's going to babysit, for Halloween night, the same day. So anyway, she goes over there, and then he's telling her the story like, hey, don't do that. It's a scary house. And, once that goes on, it shows that she goes to school. Then you see this mysterious figure just staring her down. And then he's wearing this white mask and shit. And it's kind of funny, because they never explained, how Michael got the mask or anything like that. They kept it mysterious to keep you guessing, who's that? Who's this mystery guy, right? And later on it shows it's after school. It shows her getting out, talking to her friends. She has a friend named Annie. Then she has another friend named, what was her name? It's played by PJ Souls. Linda, there you go. I've seen this movie so many times. They're talking about girl shit and everything. While that's going on, you see Tommy Doyle get out of school, and all these kids are fucking with him. He has this big old pumpkin that he brought for school and everything. They fuck with him, they push him, he breaks his pumpkin. The bully kids, they run off, and Michael stops one of the kids. They're looking at him, and then he follows Tommy Doyle. So this whole time, Michael Myers, who's in this film, actually is known as the Shape, not as Michael Myers. He follows and stalks basically his prey. Kind of like, not a creeper, but, somebody that has malevolent ideas, right? And so anyways, after all that happens, he sees, Linda, God damn, I'm talking too damn fast. You see Linda, and then you see Laurie, and then you see Annie, the 3 girls, right? You see them walking, they're talking about the dance and all this other shit, and then Laurie was like, oh shit, I forgot my books. So then you see Michael drive by, and then he's staring him down. And then Annie, tries to be a smart ass. Hey, jerk, speed kills, I don't know if that pissed off Michael or what, but he just stopped, and then just took off. Then, Linda walks off, and then, Laurie, she starts walking Annie home, and then, little by little, you see Michael, hiding in the bush, staring her down. He's watching the whole time, And, you find nothing about it, Well, that's going on. Then it flashes back to, the doctor, the I would say psychiatrist. He's known Michael his whole life since after he killed, his sister when he was 6 years old. And he kept telling the sanitarium that, hey, y'all didn't listen to me. You should have listened to me. I told everybody, that he was crazy. That Michael Myers was going to break out one day, that they didn't know. And they're saying, you're full of shit. There's no way he could have gotten in the car and drive. My theory on that was he's been around Dr. Loomis so much, and I think Dr. Loomis had to drive him around, that he just learned how to drive that way, They never explained it, which was pretty cool because it's more mysterious, right? And while that's going on, he says, I'm going to Hannaford because I know he's probably going home. As he's driving over there through his journey, I'm flashing around in the movie. He sees that he sees a payphone on the corner of the road, and he calls the sanitarium and tells him, hey, I think he's going home, da-da-da-da-da. I'll get back to you. Then he sees this tow truck driver. His car's left behind. He looks over there, and he sees that this guy was killed, and he's already stripped of his jumpsuit, which is what Michael was wearing, right? Then all of a sudden, it shows Laurie. She goes home, and then she sees, Michael Myers staring at her and shit through the window. Linda calls her and tells her the plan, what they're going to do for Halloween, how they're going to go out drinking and doing all this shit. Annie comes and picks her up, and she has this big old pumpkin, and she's going to go, Annie and her are going to both babysit 2 different kids. Well, that's going on. It's Halloween night already. And then all of a sudden, Annie was like, hey, I'm going to go pick up my boyfriend, Paul. Can you watch, Lindsay, the girl that she's watching? And I thought it was kind of, I don't know. I mean, that whole scene, because there's a lot of talk between it. And then, I don't know if you all know this, she's on the phone with her boyfriend. And while she's talking to her boyfriend, Paul, it's actually John Carpenter talking, which I thought was a kind of cool little wink. So anyway, she goes, drops off Lindsay, goes back. She's, half naked and everything because she spilled shit on her clothes. So she's in her underwear and a button-up white shirt. She goes to her car. It's locked. Then she goes, gets her keys, comes back, and then she's like, okay, it's unlocked. And then she sees all this fog in the window. Out pops fucking Michael Myers right behind her, grabs her by the neck, and then slits her throat. And then he takes her in the house. Fucking crazy, After that, well, before all that scene, it shows that after Dr. Loomis finds the guy with the jumpsuit missing, he goes to talk to the caretaker for the graveyard, asking about the Myers family. And he finds out that Judith Myers' grave is missing. Judith was the sister of Michael Myers that he killed. So, Annie's dead. His older sister's dead. Loomis is going to town, and he's already, talking to the sheriff and everything about, hey, I think there's a crazy patient of mine. He's out here. He's going to be killing kids. We need to go look for him, da-da-da-da-da, right? And then that's when, Laurie, she's still taking care of the kids. They're watching horror films. And I thought was a pretty cool wink is that they show the Thing, which, later on John Carpenter got to do. Then it shows that Linda and her boyfriend Bob, they go over to the house that Annie was at. They see that Annie's not there. So what do the teenagers do? They drink, they get high, they have sex, all that good stuff. And then she tells them afterwards, after they have sex, hey, go get me a beer. He goes downstairs to go get a beer. Michael doesn't like that. He sees Bob, he turns around, holds him up, and then stabs the knife right through him and hangs him, right? And then he doesn't want to scare, Linda yet, so he puts a sheet over his head wearing Bob's glasses. And she thinks that he's fucking around. And then so she calls Laurie to see what's going on. And then he strangles her. And Laurie thinks on the phone oh, okay, it's a joke. He's screwing you or whatever. And you're just moaning, And then that's when Michael kind of stalks his prey. I guess you could say he was ready to attack, And then that's when Laurie kind of freaked out. So she goes over across the street to see what was going on at the house. Then she sees, it's all quiet. It's all dark. None of the lights are working. Then she sees that Annie's laid out in the bed with Judith Myers' grave behind her. And then she's all freaked out because she's dead. She sees that, Bob is hanging upside down. And then, what's her name? Linda was in there, all strangled. And then all of a sudden you see the silhouette of Michael's face. And it just lights up. The whole soundtrack was done by John Carpenter. And I'll get to the soundtrack in a second because that's another amazing feature, right? Michael, you see his face, he comes out with a fucking knife, just gets her in the shoulder, and with her being so distraught and everything, she falls down the stairs. And you would think at this point, she'd break her fucking neck, but she didn't. She breaks her ankle. Then it starts the tune. Dun dun, dun, dun dun. And then that's when Michael, he starts chasing after her. He walks down the stairs, pacing himself, she's running. She gets out of the house, starts hitting on all the doors. Help! Everyone thinks it's a Halloween joke. So she goes back to the house, and then she's like, oh, the keys, I don't have the keys. Tommy, open the damn door. He barely opens the door, and she tells him, go run up, hide. As that's going on, Dr. Loomis goes to Michael Myers' house. He talks to the sheriff about everything, about, how Michael's been his patient and everything, and how he's got this blank stare in his face and everything. And then all of a sudden, they start walking around the neighborhood, right? And then that's when Michael Myers, he gets into the house, and then he tries to stab Laurie as she's hiding in the couch. She hits him in the neck with a crochet needle. He goes down. Then he gets up, and then, well, Well, he doesn't get up right away. He's still down. So she goes up, checks the kids, and says, okay, go outside, try to go call for help, right? So the kids, they run out and try to call for help. Michael comes up, and then he's chasing after her. She runs and hides in the closet. Then you have that iconic scene where, he breaks through the closet and everything, tries to stab her. She gets the wire hanger, pokes him in the eye. She thinks he's dead. And then she's like, oh, okay, it's over. Then he fucking gets back up, right? And then all of a sudden after that, he tries to choke her and everything. And then that's when Dr. Loomis sees the kids run out. He runs in the house. And then he sees Michael's trying to choke her. And then she pulls the mask up. And then he's on mask for a split second. Then he puts the mask back on. And then Loomis shoots him with a fucking .357, a 6-shooter. Bah, bah. 6 times, right? And as he's getting shot, Michael doesn't say a word or anything. I'm just giving it for effects, And anyways, he falls off the fucking balcony because it's a 2-story house. And then, they show that he's there. And then she says, was that the boogeyman? And then that's when he tells her, I'm afraid so it was. And then they look down, and then his body's gone. Then the movie ends with the fucking Halloween theme playing. Great fucking movie. I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better, right? Now I'm going to get into the little tidbits. As I said in the soundtrack, this movie was done on such a short shoestring budget. At the time, they were, how do you say it? The budget was $300,000. Back in the day, $300,000 seems like it's a lot, but not when you have to focus on, paying the actors, the costumes, the this, the that, and everything. So everything was done on a shoestring budget. And John Carpenter, the way that he did this and sold this idea to a production company, he basically said, I want to do a horror film that involves babysitters being killed. And that's originally what it was supposed to be called, the Babysitter Killers, which would have been a pretty cool idea. So, and the only twist to it was they did it around Halloween, and they had nothing in the titles to say Halloween. They were just originally call it the Babysitter Killers. And once they got everything all said and done, and then, because John Carpenter, he had $300,000. Most of the money was spent on the top-of-the-line camera equipment at the time, which is why you never see a film shot like that anymore. And then, 2, Sam Loomis, Donald Pleasance, who played Sam Loomis, I should say, I corrected myself there, he was paid $20,000. So that's a good chunk out of your $300,000 right there, just for camera and, Donald Pleasance. He wanted Donald Pleasance because he knew he was a great fucking actor, right? Everybody else, they weren't so well-known names yet, other than the character played by PJ Soles, who played Linda. She was a B-rate horror movie star already because she had already done Carrie, and so she was the only other well-known actor in this film. But everybody in this film knew somebody, like Annie was married to the production designer, and Linda, PJ Soles, she was, basically well known, and John Carpenter, he wrote roles and stuff. He wrote the role of Linda for her, based from Carrie. And Jamie Lee Curtis, she was Janet Leigh's daughter. He kept everything a lot in-house. Charles Cyphers, who played the sheriff, Annie's father. He was, he had worked with Carpenter before on Assault on Precinct 13. So it was pretty cool that he kept it all in-house, And a lot of the features with it is that, on a shoestring budget, you have to learn how to be ingenious. You got to be creative, right? So this is what John Carpenter did. He spent all the money on the camera, Donald Pleasance. They didn't have any money for costumes, so all the wardrobes they're wearing, that's all their real clothes. And I laugh because, Macy's has been around for a long time. They actually said they went to Macy's, all the actors, and they had $100, and they basically spent $100 to get like 10 wardrobes. I'm thinking, shit, you can't do that today, But it's kind of interesting how they did all that, And then the fact that they also shot it in Pasadena, California. For those of you that don't live in California, I'm going to tell you right now, because I'm a California boy, I'm in California right now, 90% of the time, it's always fucking hot. It barely rains, unless you're like on the coastal side and stuff. In Pasadena, it's a nice town. It's in Southern California. It's usually pretty warm, pretty cozy. Even in, October, November, everything's still lush and green. And that was a problem with this filming. So what John Carpenter did, he had some help from, the local schools nearby, like USC. He basically had them get, like, paper, like white butcher paper, and they all painted it, like, red, different shades of brown. And they chopped it all up. And then that's what they used to make it look like it was fall. Because some of the scenes you can see that there's like palm trees and shit like that. But I thought it was pretty interesting because that also took a big chunk of the budget is my point that I was trying to get across. Because that was a lot of manpower, a lot of work to try to get that shit done, you know? As far as the mask goes, yes, as I said, it's based off of William Shatner's face. Tommy Lee Wallace, the guy who's the production designer, and who also has done other films later on. He did Halloween 3. Obviously, he did the original It movie for the TV made movie. He's also, all these people were very well talented. And with Tommy Lee Wallace, what he did, he said, okay, I have $10 to, go buy a mask and try to do what I can with it, right? So on a budget of $10, he goes to like this local drugstore that was, nearby in Pasadena. He buys a Captain Kirk mask, one of the off-brand cheap ones. Something similar to what I did with my SaWGuy mask. And he redesigned it into his own vision, And it was a full overhead mask. Back in those days, they used to make them pretty good quality, And he basically widened the eye holes. He, I guess he used a blow dryer to kind of mold the face a little bit. Because if you look at pictures of the original Captain Kirk mask and the original Michael Myers mask, you could tell that they used like a blow dryer to kind of melt it a little bit to kind of give it its weird, unique shape, right? They changed the hair, ripped all the hair off, put new hair in. And then the biggest iconic thing they did was spray paint it white, right? And the reason why they wanted to spray paint it white, and I love John Carpenter for this, because this is a huge wink to Alfred Hitchcock. And what John Carpenter was trying to go for was, if the face is white, your imagination runs wild, and you can have, it's a mental thought of saying it's more scary than actually putting work into making a scary mask. Does that make sense? Because your mind runs wild when you start thinking like, oh shit, it's a blank stare, it's a blank face. Another thing is he wanted to keep it mysterious, which I thought was cool because, they remade this film, Rob Zombie did, and the remake was great. Don't get me wrong. It was cool because the remake gave, Michael Myers a backstory and all that. But Michael Myers, the character of him from John Carpenter, was so well thought out that he didn't need a backstory. You just show 2 minutes at the beginning how he snapped and kills his sister, and that's all you need. And I thought it was also interesting too was during the filming, because of the budget being so tight, they turned around and they had like 5 different actors that played Michael Myers in different scenes that you see throughout the whole film. Tommy Lee Wallace, the guy who designed the mask and did, the It movie and Halloween 3, he was Michael Myers in the iconic breaking through the closet scene, right? That was him. Tony Moran, he was the guy who was Michael Myers when he got unmasked. When he got unmasked and then put the mask on, that was Tony Moran. Nick Castle, there's been rumors and speculations. I don't know if they've ever confirmed it. They said that he played majority of the film, where he's standing in the bush, and he was also a stuntman, so they said he was the one that took the fall from the balcony to the ground and all that stuff. Obviously, it wasn't to the ground. It was like on a padding and shit, but that's what I thought was pretty cool, and they all used the same mask, because they were on a budget. They didn't have enough money to do like a separate one or a fucked up one, and then, after they did all this, back to what I was saying on the soundtrack, the budget was so tight, and you got to factor in all that. So the wardrobe, the mask, the this, that, da-da-da-da-da, right? John Carpenter finished the film, showed it, as a test screen, and what's funny is that he had no money to do, like, any of the soundtrack. He just did the Halloween theme, the intro, and then they changed, well, I'll get to that in a second. They show the intro with the theme, and then they show the whole movie. So imagine playing the whole movie, and then with no sound, It was just, it's not as terrifying, right? So when the test screening came back, they said it wasn't as terrifying. There was no music. John Carpenter got pissed and said, you know what, fuck that. I'm going to do the whole soundtrack myself and make it scary. So he did the soundtrack. All the different themes and everything you hear throughout the whole film, that was all John Carpenter. And when he did that and put it in the film, it made it that much better. Now back to the title. The Babysitter Killers was the original title. It was somebody from one of the production company. They said, well, hey, no one's ever done a film based on a holiday, other than, I think it was at the time, Black Christmas had already, either it was coming out or something. It was nearby Black Christmas, you know? And even then, that wasn't like a holiday movie called Christmas. So they said, you know what? A lot of this movie takes place in Halloween. Let's just call it Halloween. And then the rest was history, right? This movie blew up so fucking huge. And it's still, to this day, in 2018, it's the #1 greatest independent film ever made. You know, out of every film. You know, because they did it, for one, on a shoestring budget. 2, it just blew the waters out and it made so much money. And then 3, it came out at the right time, you know. As I was saying earlier in this episode, you had the Zodiac Killer and everything going on. People were afraid, people weren't afraid. So you have all this hype. It kind of reminds me what Psycho did in the 50s and how Alfred Hitchcock played off on that. Like, this is the scariest film ever. You need to be here on this time and see this film, and no one's allowed to leave the theater. He did a little bit of that aspect, but not as, you know, great detail as what Hitchcock did. But I thought what was pretty cool is that, you know, it became so huge, and it just automatically, everybody in the whole movie that was associated with it all made their names. Because then John Carpenter ended up doing, you know, all these other films later on, right? Tommy Lee Wallace, he turned around and became a big name for himself too, you know. And then you find out that he was multi-talented just as well, and he did the whole theme for, or not the whole theme. He did the voiceover for the Happy Halloween theme for Halloween 3, and then he did it. And then you find out other actors, you know, like Jamie Lee Curtis. She became a huge worldwide star because of this film, right? And, what's his name? Donald Pleasance, he became pretty huge, and he started doing other Carpenter films and everything. He basically was the Halloween franchise with the character The Shape, or Michael Myers. Because in the script, they called him The Shape. They didn't call him Michael Myers, because then it would throw everything off, right? But I thought it was pretty cool, you know? And now, here we are, 40 years later after the release. and it seems like, you know, when I was a kid, it was like maybe, you know, 10, 15 years ago, at most, when I saw this film, like, damn, this is scary, you know? And this film it kept growing and growing and growing and growing, because there's that young generation, well, older generation now, and when they were young, this was scary as shit. And because of it being so big, they did sequels, right? Obviously, they did up to, at this point, because you got 1, 2, 3 had nothing to do with Michael Myers, 4, 5, 6. Then you have H2O, Resurrection. Then you have the 2 remakes from Rob Zombie. So they're at 11 films now with this new one coming out. And it's still growing strong from what I heard. You know, so honestly, this film, it's such a great, great film. It really is. And not only that, it stands to this day as still being scary as fuck. Because, you know, what was scary back in the day in the 70s is still scary as shit now. Because, who knows? Now these days we live in a America where, you know, you have to lock your doors all the time. You have to, you know, look behind you as you unlock your door and turn around and make sure no one's behind you and lock the door and that kind of shit. That's the kind of world we live in now. But also, too, at the same time, you never know if someone's following you like Michael Myers was doing to Laurie Strode. You know, you never know if, like, say, for instance, if you have a young teenage kid, you know, what's going to happen? Could someone break in during Halloween and do this shit? Well, not on Halloween, you know, but, I mean, could someone actually do this and stuff? And that's the, you know, real life aspect of fear. And John Carpenter knocked it out of the ballpark with that, you know? Later on, his films, most of them had to do with realistic fear, which, you know, like They Live and all those other ones. But I know he's also adapted some other films, well, works that wasn't his. You know, he did Christine. But I mean, for the most part, John Carpenter, he got the nickname one of the masters of horror because he had this real aspect to it, you know? And this film, as I said, still holds up because, you know, we still live in that America today that, you know, you could be safe and, you know, live in a small town where everybody knows everybody. But at the same time, you know, what if an outsider comes in and something happens? You never know, right? And it plays off a lot on that. And what I love about it is just the community on the horror genre. We grew because of Halloween, because of the success in the 70s, you know, with just Halloween alone. I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Town That Dreaded Sundown, they were okay, but, you know, people were so afraid to see them because they thought they were snuff films. Halloween broke that barrier, and after that, then you had copycats. Then, obviously, you know, you had what's his name? I was gonna say what's his name. Yeah, Friday the 13th that came out, and then later on it spawned sequels on that. After that, then you had A Nightmare on Elm Street, and then John Carpenter paved the way for slashers and just horror in general. That was what really kickstarted it. All the horror films in the 80s. Eventually, we all know later on it slowed down towards the end and stuff like that, but horror films really took a boom because of Halloween. And I'm excited for it because, with this new film coming out, I know I've done my horror news updates and I haven't done those in a while. I kept a lot of my, subscribers and fans, everybody all updated on this new Halloween film and how they were going to do it and everything. And I thought it was pretty cool that John Carpenter was involved in it as a consultant. You had Danny McBride, a comedian, writing it. And then they basically came out and said, okay, the story takes place 40 years after the original. So it bypasses the second one. So how they're going to do this new one, I don't know. I don't know if some of you have already seen it. Some of you haven't seen it. I'm personally waiting till the Halloween weekend myself to go see it because what other better day to see it, right? But also, too, I wanted to do this episode on Halloween because Halloween, for me, has always been one of those films that we can all, in my family, we can all watch because it's not too, well, it's scary, but it's not scary enough to where there's like so much gore that everyone's like, oh, let's go, but we all can enjoy it, everybody can enjoy it. It's scary, but it's not, grotesque. It's not like the new shit that I like now, but it still holds up, we'll be talking about this probably 20 years from now. They'll call it Halloween 60, and it's still going to be a big thing because this film really changed the industry, not only for Hollywood, but for horror films and for, horror fans like me and all you guys out there that are tuning in, So, but anyways, thank you all for joining in on this episode on Halloween. Hope you're still enjoying your Halloween festivities. And, if you've seen the new Halloween film or haven't seen it yet, if you're hyped up like me, let me know in the comments below. I'm anxious to hear about everything, guys. And as always, you all know what happens when I'm done, right?
Bow down to the